It was a late night at Camelot Castle. Luna had just taken care of the rise in the moon, and she decided to take a night flight by herself, since she normally do take flight by the night. And since it was still summer and she enjoys flying around in the summer nights, it's peaceful for her. And after she has been flying around for about an hour or so, she decided to land nearby a small lake, a small river. She sat there and just enjoy the view. For the full moon and clear sky is a perfect moment just having a good time for herself. As she was sitting there, she only heard the crickets, some of the frogs, and the wind in the trees. But suddenly she heard a voice behind her, a male voice, who said, "Lovely evening, isn't it?" Luna stood up, looked around, and saw a stallion, an earth pony. An earth pony with dark coat, with a black hair like mane, and yellow eyes. She smiled and said it was a lovely night. He slowly walked up to her and just stood about only a short distance from her, looking at the sky, and said he often goes to this particular place himself, almost every night, because this is his favorite spot where he can just sit and relax and just enjoy but listen to night's sounds of the nature. At first, they didn't speak much. They were just silent. They both listened to the sound of the nature around them until she broke the silence by asking him who he is. And he said his name is Vlad. And she was about to say, "And you are Princess Luna. I know. I've seen you before." She blushed a little bit to say that, and after that moment, they were talking about almost anything, what they liked to do, some of their personal interests, hobbies, and then Luna asked where he's from, and he mentioned that he lives in a small cabin in the forest when he used close by. He has been living there by himself for many years. He used to live in Candelot many years ago when he was young, but since after his parents passed away when he was young, he decided he couldn't stand living in the in the big city life. He used to live only several years after his parents passed away, but he couldn't handle the stress, all this sound of the noises of during the day and night. So he decided to move out from Camelot, and he found this old cabin in the in the woods, which he restored and had lived since. And she asks him if he ever spends some time with other ponies, which he do, because he goes to a nearby village, a small village nearby, to get some supplies from time to time. And other than that, he spends some time by himself, either fishing or just work out in the nature or in forest like we do normally do. She explains that she can understand the feeling because she tells them that with so much work as being a princess, one of the rulers of Equestria, it can be tiring. So that is why she often goes out for flight at night and and flies to different places where she can sit down and just relax and having a good moment by herself. Even though that she really, even though sometimes she do prefer with some company. But since her sister usually goes to sleep around at nightfall, so she goes by herself. And then, at the moment, Vlad had asked Luna if she wanted to have go back to his cabin to have something to drink, maybe some tea. And she said yes. She went with him to his cabin, and she was very impressed how big the cabin was. When he did mention his cabin, she thought maybe as like a big room for like a living room and a small bedroom, but it wasn't that. It was like two storage cabin. She was really impressed how much he had really stored so well. And while were sitting down and having tea together, they would just small talked about from time to time, and things between them seemed to get a bit better because they had so much things in common. They both like to be sitting watching the nature in nighttime, and they have so much things in common. And both of them decided they perhaps could see each other more often. Maybe just either having some tea or perhaps just sitting at the outside of his cabin and just small talk about things that happened. And about 2 hours later, Luna said that she would have to go back to the castle, but she thanks him for his company and she will appreciate it if she could come back, which he did said, which Vlad said that she could. And later, before Luna went to sleep, she was laying in her bed and thinking that Vlad was so handsome, so gentle cold. He was always honest and had this amazing smile. So, but she decided to tell her sister about her meeting with Vlad by the next day. Around early next morning at the breakfast, Luna was happy, smiling when her sister came down to have some breakfast. They both said good morning and started having breakfast together. And then, Celestia seeing that Luna was smiling and seems quite happy. So she asked her if what was the case that she was so happy for suddenly. Luna then mentioned about her encounter with Vlad last night. Celestia was a little bit surprised because she didn't expect that Luna had seen any other ponies lately. But Luna mentioned that this was actually the very first time she did meet him. She explained that it is what he told her, that he was born in Kentland, but now lives in a small forest in a cabin. And Luna, how do you know much about him that if you had you talked to him? Well, she said to her sister that she thinks he's quite handsome and is truthfully honest, and she actually enjoyed his company. So, and she had even decided to go back to see him that same night. And Celestia said that just have a good time. So she did. But at the end of the day, Luna went to see Vlad. She even went to his cabin. She knocked on the door, but no answer. She knocked on the door again, but no answer. She opened the door slightly, but there was light. The open fireplace was still burning, and she wonders if he was asleep. But she decided to go inside and sit down and wait for him. And only a short moment later, he walks in. He was so surprised to see Luna there. He wasn't even expecting her to back to the same next day. But he was just happy that she been arrived. And it turned out he was just outside to get some more firewood. And he made some more tea and even had some bakes and scones for her. So they were just sitting there having talk, and even that they both have a great time. Vlad seems to be a very quite handsome, and even that she enjoys company. Even though that when Luna asked about his life and what his childhood were, like if he had any many friends back home, or if he missed any of his friends, he said that he usually did miss his friends back from time to time, And in fact, he actually goes back to Cantlot maybe a few times each month to see his friends. But that is all he do. She asks him if he would maybe go back living in Cantlot if he had the opportunity. He said with a small sigh that he had been thinking about that for some times, but after living alone, or at least living in the cabin for some time, he had preferred to be living there instead. But if he still had any family members or a good friend back home, he could perhaps staying there for only a short time before go back home to his cabin again. So then Luna just asked if he would get married with some pony, perhaps from Cantlot, and would he have to live in Cantlot with her, or would he have to move to the cabin? And Vlad said that was a good question, but he said it depends if she would like to live in a cabin or if she would prefer living in a big city. There can be different points from that, he said, which she understood. And they spent the rest of the night together just having some talk and suddenly they both fall asleep on the couch. And they didn't wake up until next morning. Luna was woke up when the sun hit her in the eyes, and she realized she had been sleeping on the couch with Vlad the whole night. She didn't realize until she saw him. And he wakes up the same moment as she did. He made some breakfast from both, and she stayed there for only after breakfast when she decided that she had to go back home. And when she came back, Celestia wasn't even worried. When Celestia said that she was a bit worried, but when Luna mentioned that she had been sleeping and spent the night at Vlad's home, at least that she had fallen asleep after they had been talking most of the night, Celestia was smiling and said it just happened that she had found some pony that she could spend some time with, happened to have some things in common. But it was something else though. After nearly about a few weeks of being talking with Vlad, Luna had decided maybe to invite him over to the castle for dinner with his sister. And at first, Vlad, he was a bit hesitant about this. He hasn't been back in the castle at least for about a few months now. And but Luna did said to Vlad he didn't have to be forced. If he didn't want to go to Cantlot, it was okay for him. But he must say that he would like to go see and have dinner with her sister. After all, he's not all the same. They're not every day you'll be invited to the castle to have dinner with the royal princesses. And for the first time in quite some time, Vlad walks into town. He felt so nervous, but when he arrived at the castle, he felt both proud but quite nervous. It was like having a rock in his chest. He didn't know what to do, but when he walks into the dining room, Luna walks up to him and says hello. And when Celestia sees him, she can understand why Luna likes him so much. She confirms that he is quite handsome. Even though during the first time when they had dinner, Vlad was a bit shy at first. When Celestia decided to ask him some just simple harmless questions like what it's like to live in a cabin, how his life was before he moved there. It's like some of the questions. And after some while, he actually started enjoying his company. What happened? After dinner, it was quite late, and since the travel to Vlad's cabin takes a bit while, so Celestia had offered for Vlad for Vlad to stay at the night at the castle, which he accepted. And but even that night he couldn't sleep, so he decided to go down to the castle garden, where he could maybe sit down and perhaps help to fall asleep. But doing so, he realized that Luna had also been walking down to the in the castle garden at the same time. They didn't walk into each other until they saw that they were both in the castle garden. They both smiled and laughed a bit about this. It was like the having the same thing on their mind. They couldn't sleep, so they just sit there at the fountain, just small talked. But after about a half hour or so, they went back in the castle and had didn't fall and didn't have any problem to fall asleep even then though. It did take some time for Luna and Vlad to spend more time. They weren't even dating. They were just friends who had spent some time together. But after almost about 2 months of being had spent some time together, Luna had started falling in love with Vlad. But she didn't know how to tell him or if she should tell him. The only pony who knows about this was actually Celestia. And Celestia told her sister that if she really loved him so much, at least likes him that much, she should at least tell him about her feelings. Even if that he maybe doesn't like her way same back the same way, he will only have the world know if she doesn't tell him. So Luna decided to tell Vlad after some time though, but she didn't know exactly how to tell him. But after being had been thinking of different options of the opportunities how to tell him, or in a different ways. But after a while, she decided to tell him how she feels for him. So when she went to see him at his cabin after about a few days after being thinking, she told him. And he told her that not was as a big surprise because he had a feeling that she was having a crush on him. And when she found out when he told her that, she blushed and said that she couldn't even wait, she couldn't stop it because he had been so nice to her, so kind, and makes her laugh sometimes, and he didn't mind to be doing that for her. And after they'd been dating for about at least a couple of days, Luna announced to the public that she had having a boyfriend. And the public was really surprised that Luna having a boyfriend. No pony can never couldn't remember ever since she had a boyfriend last time. And in fact, Vlad was her very first boyfriend. But the public was just happy to see that Luna was happy. Even though one day when Luna had invited Vlad over to some dinner at the castle, which he accepted. But when he came there, it was a bit surprising that there was not only Luna and Celestia. In fact, Celestia had invited Twilight and Cadence over for dinner. He was a bit surprised, but he wasn't even angry because he knew about them, and they were just happy to get to know and need to meet Luna's boyfriend for the first time, even though that Luna was a bit nervous how this first reaction between Cadence Twilight with Vlad. But it turned out to be a perfect moment, and they all had a great moment at the dinner though. And the dinner lasted for almost the entire evening, so Vlad had to stay over the castle again, but he didn't mind it. But after nearly about several days being, he decided, in fact, to stay in Canada for several days. And he did. As they were walking around the town, he showed her around some places where he grew up, where he went to school, and even sometimes even met some all of his old friends. And they were even happy to know that Vlad was in fact been dating Luna. But Luna didn't mention her boyfriend's name when she made the big announcement. Only she had a boyfriend. She didn't want to reveal his true name at the moment. But it didn't take long for the public to realize that Vlad was in fact her boyfriend. Because for the several days when he was staying in Canada, they spent a lot of time together. So they didn't take much time for the public to realize that Vlad was in fact Luna's boyfriend. But most of the offended subjects were really happy to see that Luna was smiling and just having a great time with Vlad. And of course, even though when Vlad was going back home to his cabin, Luna felt a little bit sad about that, but she knows that she is always welcome to get to go to see him. But just the day before, when Vlad was going back home, she had invited him. He had invited Luna over in about a few days for maybe have a dinner with him. But she declined the offer, and he was a bit shocked, asked why. It turned out she's going to be away for at least several days with Celestia. She is going back to Crystal Empire for about almost a week for some meeting with some diplomats from Saudi Arabia, and she wouldn't be unable to spend some time with him. But he understood. He can say that they can always be arranged in that for another time. And she said yes, and she hoped to be able to do so soon. They give each other a hug and a kiss, but then it happened. After about a week, Luna wrote a letter to Vlad saying informing him that she will be over there for about a week, for next a couple of days, and he was happy about it. A few days later, Luna went to see Vlad at his cabin, and he had cooked amazing dinner, and they had an amazing time though. First, they had the dinner, and later on, took a small walk together in the forest, and to end the perfect date was to watch the stars and the moon by the river nearby his home, and it was a perfect ending, and they even saw a shooting star. Vlad made a wish that he and Luna to be together forever. And after being dating for about 4 years, Vlad had decided to ask Luna the big question. Because he had went into Camelot one day without informing Luna. Because she was even in town back then. She was in fact in Crystal Empire to see Cadence and Shining Armor for about some royal royal meeting or something. And when she came to see him, he took her to the same place by the river, and during the weird scene there, he was so nervous how she would react. But she was really, really happy about this. She had tearful eyes, and when he asked her, she said yes immediately. And when they had informed Luna, her sister, Celestia, she was not even more, could have been more happier for her sister. And even for most of all, even their friends was really happy. Luna had asked Celestia to be her bridesmaid and at twilight to perform the wedding. Even after all the wedding was happened, they celebrated a whole week in Saddle Arabia, and they're just having a great time. And 3 years later, Luna announced that Vlad and Luna were going to have a baby, and an entire kingdom could not have been happier for them both. And they even had a son, which they named Midnight, Prince Midnight. Midnight, though, when he was growing up, he was so energetic. His mother could not even handle his outbursts of energy training, or at least they thought that he was going to be a unicorn or at least an alicorn, but it turned out he was an earth pony. But he was so energetic, like a unicorn. So, like, running down in the hallways and laughing, making some pranks against the guards and all of that. But they were just happy that he was willing to guide it. Their lives was so perfect. And one day, when Vlad took with Midnight to the cabin, which they had now part of the family, to have some just as like a father-son moment, while Livna was in Saudi Arabia with her sister for some royal beating. Things was going quite well until one morning when Vlad was just going back to cabin with some firewood and some fresh water when he was about to wake up their son. But he found the bed empty. He thought maybe that he was upstairs and went up there, but it was not. He searched in the entire cabin and even outside nearby, but nothing. He even called for his son several times, but no answer. This was not an ordinary happen, because it happens that Midnight sometimes hides from his parents, and after a while he started giggling or at least small laughing, and they could find him. So Vlad wasn't even a bit worried at first. He listened for his son's voice or laughter, but all he can hear was birds and the wind in the trees. Now he was getting worried. He went back inside the cabin again for the search for a second time, just in case if he had missed him. But he didn't. This time he was even more worried. But now he found something else. The window. At first he didn't notice the window in Midnight's bedroom was opened, wide open. And since Midnight was an earth pony, it would be unlikely that he would just leave the window room through the window. And since his room was on the second floor, up to about at least about 6 feet above the ground, it wouldn't be unlikely that he would just jump out from the window, since he was only about 2 to 3 years old at the time. Now, Vlad was getting seriously panicking, but tried to keep calm until he found a note. The note said, "We have your son. If you want to see him, give us 1,000,000 bits at the old tree at the old ruin of at the old ruins of the castle. If you don't, you will never see your son ever again." He was so mad, and he took the note, left the cabin, went all the way to the cantonment. But he knew that Luna and Celestia wasn't even there. But he decided to take the train to Ponyville, where he can find Twilight, who will also be a good friend of his now. When he arrived there, he was not spending a second. He went all the way to the castle He knocked on the door, like banging on the door, and Spike was just like, hang on, I'm coming. And then just as they opened the door, Vlad didn't spend a second to explain. He just ran indoors, and Spike like, Vlad? But he didn't say anything. As Twilight was in the library, he asked, where's Twilight? Library? Alright, thanks. And he ran up to her. And Twilight was just sitting with Starlight, just reading some books, when suddenly, when Vlad just rushes in, puts the note on the table, and says, read. And she does. And she freaks out. Have you told Luna? Or Celestia? But he said that they aren't even in Canada. They're in Saudi Arabia for about a week. And he has no way to contact them. And he hasn't even the money to do paying for this. He has no idea what to do. Luna has a way, he said. Both Twilight and Vlad used to look at Starlight. How? She said. With this. This is a orb communication. Luna gave me this one just in case if I would need her talk to her about something, and she always brings with hers. So they used it to contact Luna. And it was just perfect, because she and Celestia at the moment had just left the meeting with the diplomats from Saudi Arabia. And Luna fainted when they told her about this big bad news. Celestia's health said they believe Saudi Arabia immediately and will be back with them at the end of the day, and hoping they will have her nephew safe soon. At the end of the day, Luna and Celestia arrived at Ponyville, and Luna didn't spend a second because she ran all the way to the castle. She was crying. She was freaking out about what happened to her. Their son has been kidnapped. Vlad was walking back and forward in the castle library, and he was really freaking out himself. Luna wasn't even mad against him because they knew that he was only since the river near the cabin was only about 7 feet away from the cabin, and he would be probably hearing anything if something would happen. But both of them was freaking out. But Luna, be calm, said Twilight. How can I be calm when my son has been kidnapped? She said, Luna, freaking out. Please, Luna, said Celestia. Twilight might have an idea of how to find him, don't you? I'm afraid not, Princess. Not this time. At least from what I can. I've been searching from the books over and over to find anything how to save him, or at least track him. But since we know that will be taken to the old ruins, said Starlight, wouldn't we have just put some guards or anything in the area? No, it's too risky, said Luna. I'm agreed, said Vlad. But we can't risk our son's life. If we had to pay them the money, I'm willing to do so. Even if it means my own life to the risk. Don't say like that, said Luna. Our son's life is more worth than any money in the entire kingdom. How about this idea, said Starlight. If we have some ponies in like ambush and keep them invisible by spell for a short time, and they will be outside surrounding the old castle, but Vlad gives them money, and after he leaves, when they walk up to this money, we can place like a stun orb which explodes and stuns them temporarily, and the guards who has been invisible can rush up to them and capture them before they realize what's happening. Both the others were really thinking about this idea and said, "It is best idea we have. It might work," said Twilight. "Are you are you sure?" said Luna. "Yes, and if Starlight was helping us, it will work. I'm guarantee it," said Luna. Said Twilight. So all the preparations was ongoing. They didn't waste a second. They informed at least a squadron of guards about this idea, and they all agreed to help. They were put spell to be invisible, which was going to last for about 4 hours. So they walked in to the outside around the old castle, and they placed the money in a bag or a sack, and they placed this orb. It was programmed, or at least supposed to be, after being exposed to some light, it will explode and cause bright light and bright sound, which temporarily paralyze the kidnappers and for a brief moment. After they went to the castle, they brought Vlad walks in and he brings the sack to the kidnappers and he walks away with his son. After they open the sack, it goes exactly as they planned to. And all the kidnappers are paralyzed of the sound and the strong light. They will suddenly, after this, that the squad of soldiers and the guards arrested them, and they were all sentenced life and time in prison in Tartarus without even be possible released. And after all this, midnight, he was even hurt, but he was a bit scared, but he knows that now he's safe with his parents. After all this event, though, he was terrified they would be back, but both Vlad and Luna informed him that they would never bother him or his friends or family ever again. Even though for Luna and Vlad, this was the most scariest moment in their life, realizing that their son was kidnapped and they was powerless to save him. But it was until after Twilight and Starlight's help they were able to get their son back safely. And this is how the most powerful love between a parent will go. And for Luna and Vlad, this was the most terrifying moment, but also happiest moment that the son was unhurt, unharmed, and he was safe with them once again. Even for both Luna and Vlad, after all this happened, they were both really happy that their son was safe. And this is how Vlad and Luna, for the true love, got a family together. The end.